Whatever happened to Martin Schulz, the former leader of Germany's Social Democrats, who challenged Angela Merkel last year for the chancellery and failed spectacularly? Well, he's my guest this week here in Berlin. Why did his campaign fail, and how does he react to criticism of his time as president of the European Parliament? Martin Schulz, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you very much.
Looking back on your campaign to become Chancellor, you admitted that you had made stupid mistakes, you said, and miscalculations. But the biggest problem was trust, wasn't it? You broke key promises. Why?
During the campaign, I think it was not a lack of trust. It was a very specific atmosphere. Angela Merkel tried successfully to escape from what we need in an election campaign: open confrontation, the competition of arguments for the best solutions. That was
but you promised not to enter a grand coalition with Angela Merkel's Conservatives.
That was after the campaign.
Yes.
You spoke, your question concerned the campaign and the mistakes made in the campaign. After the campaign, I personally promised not to join a government under the leadership of Angela Merkel. That's true. But I did it on behalf of the whole party, as the leader of the party.
And then it was a broken promise, nonetheless, wasn't it?
Then the party changed the opinion, changed the strategy, and I was in the very difficult situation that the party as a whole joined the government, but asked the leader of the party not to join the government because of that promise. I understood that message of the members of my party, that they insisted that the leader of the party should not join the government.
You had promised never to serve in a Merkel-led cabinet,
I found this very contradictory, but at the end, yes, I promised it. And
you broke the promise?
After I saw that I couldn't keep the promise and that the overwhelming majority of members of my parliament insisted to do it, I resigned.
So you couldn't stick to promises, you couldn't stick to decisions you'd made. That's a hard label to wear, isn't it? Jürgen Falter, political scientist at Mainz University, said this endless vacillation was Schulz's undoing. He's right, isn't he?
I don't comment Mr. Walter's comments, but the situation was not as easy as Mr. Walter tries to describe it. There is a party leader saying, because the whole party and the whole leadership unanimously says we don't join a government with Merkel. Then the leader insists and is already criticized to keeping that line. I kept the line with a unanimous vote. And then all the other people of the leadership of my party changed the strategy, joined the government, and asked me not to do the same thing.
So you blame the party?
No.
You don't blame yourself for breaking the promises?
I blame myself. The miscalculation we spoke about was that I misunderstood, and this is my mistake, that normally it is unthinkable that a party changed with good arguments a strategy and is asking the leader of the party not to follow that strategy. And okay, that was the case, and therefore I resigned. Mr. Walter is, I think, a man who is always commenting, but from a point of view very far from the practical experiences politicians have to make.
I understand. During the campaign, you often seemed to have conflicting roadmaps. You were plagued with doubts. You didn't know if you should be Schulz the European or Schulz the local candidate. And in July 2017, you said, maybe I'm the wrong candidate. The people are nice to me, but it's out of pity. Do you accept now that you were the wrong candidate?
No. Listen, you are quoting things published in the book by a journalist who accompanied me and in an election campaign.
Who followed you? Who followed your campaign closely?
During an election campaign, there are strong moments and weaker moments. If you have to live 24 hours around the clock under that pressure, from time to time, you make also observations under that pressure who have nothing to do with the reality. This is human. And
it's you. It's you.
Yeah, that's me.
You were expressing who you were at that time, what you felt.
Yeah.
You were carrying a lot of anger, weren't you?
I think there are perhaps moments even in your life that you say, if I should continue to interview politicians in conflict zone. I don't know. There's such a nice thing in life to do. Why should I continue? So such moments are in your life for sure, also from time to time, and politicians are
but I wasn't trying to become chancellor, and
No.
you were. That's the difference.
Politicians are human beings as all the others. I don't understand the question. What has it to do to becoming chancellor that in a very specific moment there is a kind of weakness, exhausted, in the middle of the night, completely tired, and then you say such a word, and then a journalist is publishing, and then somebody is asking me in conflict zone, you are unable to become a chancellor because you say such things. I disagree. Angela Merkel has such weak moments for sure also.
But it's how you handle pressure, isn't it?
No.
Aren't people entitled to know how you handle pressure?
No.
Whether you lose it when the going gets tough?
If you want machines as politicians, you should continue to insist on it. If you want that politicians are human beings like all the others, like their voters, then you should follow my line.
Were you a good loser? You said in a television program after the results that Angela Merkel had been the biggest loser and she'd run a scandalous campaign. And then afterwards you admitted to your colleagues, I guess I came across as a bit of a jerk, as a disgruntled jerk.
If you want to interview me about that book, okay, we can continue.
No, these were observations that you made.
The whole time you are quoting...
The observations that you made.
You are quoting that book. This is a journalist, I allowed him to come very keen to me. Angela Merkel ran a scandalous campaign, and I was very angry in that evening about that campaign. She lost 9% in the polls, so that is, I think, the description of a reality, and I'm not a bad loser.
Are you looking for a comeback into federal politics?
No, I'm not looking
Definitely not.
I'm not looking for a comeback. I'm here. I don't have to get back to come back.
But into federal politics?
I'm serving as a member of the German Parliament,
yes,
and therefore I have not to come back.
I'm
here.
Do you see yourself?
Why are you interviewing me in conflict zone?
Why
are you interviewing me in conflict zone?
Why? Because I want to find out about what you thought about your campaign and your time as European Parliament president.
I'm still interesting for conflict zone. So I don't have to get and organize a comeback. I'm here.
No, but I'm asking about your future intentions, whether you still see yourself on the federal stage, playing a part in federal politics, putting yourself back as a candidate in the future.
As a candidate, no.
No.
Candidate for what?
For chancellor.
No.
Monday. No? That's gone, is it?
I think the question for the time being is not who will run the SPD for the next election campaign, how to improve the situation of the party. This is the biggest question for the time being.
But you have specific views on that too?
As everybody.
Is the party listening to you?
I hope so.
Let's talk, if we may, about your time as President of the European Parliament. In the election campaign, you accused Angela Merkel of committing an attack on democracy. That was one of the criticisms you had of her. But you presided in Europe over an institution that was widely criticized for its democratic deficits, wasn't it?
Especially by the Murdoch press in the United Kingdom.
No, not just the Murdoch press.
Most of that critique is coming from UK and from right-wing tendencies in the United Kingdom.
Are you saying it's not valid?
This is a directly elected parliament. The only directly elected institution in the European Union is the European Parliament. If the European Union is not sufficiently democratic, I agree. But this is not, especially the European Parliament, the other way around. This is the only directly elected institution in the European Union. Therefore, this is completely nonsense.
But the elections that brought you to the presidency twice, these were decided behind closed doors, weren't they? There was an election, but it was decided beforehand, wasn't it? Who was going to win?
I had to run in the parliament and I had to get a majority in the parliament.
In 2014...
What was decided behind closed doors?
In 2014, your actual...
To become a president of the parliament, you must run in the parliament and you must get a majority.
I understand that.
And you must get the majority of the parliamentarians. How can you say this was behind closed doors?
But
it was an open election, an open vote with an overwhelming majority.
But in 2014, your actual appointment to the post was announced by Sigmar Gabriel, the vice-chancellor, a full 11 days before the so-called vote, wasn't it?
He announced that I'm
European
running
president.
he announced that I'm running as a candidate. Yes, Nothing else.
But it was standard practice, wasn't it, for the largest political groups to alternate between who should have the posts. But it was standard practice, wasn't it, for the largest political groups to alternate between who should have the posts.
What is anti-democratic in that?
Well, a lot of people thought, Ulrike Lunacek of the Greens said it was a pre-cooked deal which we just had to rubber stamp. We in the Parliament just had to rubber stamp it.
In the European Parliament are 8 parliamentarian groups representing more than 300 different parties out of 28 member states of the European Union. To find a majority in the European Parliament is not functioning like in the House of Commons, either Labour or the Tories.
You're saying it wasn't a stitch-up?
You must try to build a majority, and the only majority possible to build after the election in 2014, where neither a right-wing nor a left-wing majority was possible, was that the 2 big groups cooperated, by the way, together with the Liberals.
Yeah.
So, and this was a deal between parliamentarian groups.
Yes.
And this is a normal thing in all parliaments.
But you knew before the vote that you'd won, didn't you? You knew before the vote that you were going to be president of the European Parliament.
I think this is, I don't understand your intention. Members of the European Parliament voted in a secret ballot for me with a majority. This is democracy. I was running, I had a candidate against me.
Did you know that you were going to win before?
No.
You didn't? You really didn't know?
Do you know before an election the outcome? In democracy, I think, you know the outcome after the vote.
Mr. Schulz, a lot of people attacked the European Parliament on democratic grounds, didn't they? In 2016, in the closing days of your term in office, a number of MEPs and transparency campaigners criticised the fast-tracking of legislation through the Parliament because they said key negotiations were increasingly being conducted in the shadows, these so-called trilogues, leaving far less room for debate and outside scrutiny. Why did that happen? Why did you allow that to happen? The watering down of democratic oversight.
No, I disagree once more. This is nonsense.
Alberto Alamano, professor in EU law, he said a major transparency black hole, he called it, where large concessions are won and lost with very little oversight and without public disclosure.
Wrong. It's completely wrong.
Statewatch called it a travesty of democracy. They said the opportunities for civilians, civil society, national parliaments to intervene and make their voices heard is non-existent.
I disagree completely. The European Parliament is a very transparent parliament. The debate about the trilogues, I agree with those who criticize the dialogues. As a president of the European Parliament, I tried to open dialogues more for public. By the way, not all trialogues are secret. There is a part of dialogues open, another part is secret. I tried as a president of the European Parliament in a so-called interinstitutional agreement with the Council and the Commission to open that, to make it more visible, more audible for the public. It failed because the member states' governments refused it. So to criticize for this, the European Parliament is completely wrong.
But if the European institutions aren't transparent, why should the public trust them?
Who is untransparent? The Commission is gathering in a secret way, so like all the governments in the European Union. Secondly, the Council of the European Union, the most powerful institution, the Council of Heads of States and Government, is gathering secretly. The only institution gathering openly in the committees and in the plenary is the European Parliament. Therefore, that critic is wrong.
And it kept on losing trust because fewer people...
You can't blame a democratic institution which is obliged in the frame of the interinstitutional relations of the European Union to cooperate with institutions who are secret, and then you can't make responsible the only open and transparent institution to be, as the others, not sufficiently open and transparent. This is unfair, and this unfairness, I disagree entirely. This is unfair on which is concerning the I think, wonderful work of the overwhelming majorities of members of the European Parliament in full transparency.
I understand that. So why do fewer and fewer people bother to vote in EU parliamentary elections? I mean, 2014 was the lowest ever.
This is once more, not in my country. In my country, in Germany, we
but overall, 42.6%.
In my country, we increased the turnout enormously in the last European election.
This is not across Europe. Not across Europe.
Yeah, but Europe is not a unique one piece. It is 28 governments. Answer to me the question why the turnout in the United Kingdom was so low. Meanwhile, in Germany, it was much higher. Why?
Talking about the averages. Why? The averages kept on going down since the election started.
If the European Union would be a state, and the members, federal states in the Union, in a federal sovereign state, I would agree with you. But the European Union is a union of sovereign states with very heterogeneous and specific national circumstances.
In 2014...
And therefore you can't make an average in Europe.
In 2014, the Parliament itself criticised the fact that 17.8 million euros were spent advertising the elections, and you got down to the lowest level of participation across
Not Europe. In my country. Not in my country.
Okay.
In some countries, the turnout increased. In other countries, it went down.
One of the criticisms levelled at you was
but why you are jumping now to the next question? A very interesting question. Let's keep a moment an eye on it.
Well,
you are
because we've got a lot to get through. So I hope we can just move on and talk about...
This is then a very superficial interview.
Well,
you are raising in conflict zones such important questions and giving them no chance to answer in a very...
Mr. Schulz, I've given you 16 minutes and you've answered a lot of questions, but I really want to get through quite a bit more in the time that we have.
But I think the interview, the character of the interview is conflict zone, and conflict zone means not you are raising provoking questions and I can't give provoking answers.
You're very welcome to give what answers you like, but I'd like to talk about the breaches of the Code of Conduct for MEPs, especially when it came to transparency over MEPs' earnings and second jobs. Why did you appear disinterested in following up on these breaches of the Code of Conduct?
I didn't be interested.
You were interested in following up on them?
As a president of the European Parliament and also as a group leader, yes, very interested, and I followed a lot of cases. For example, the cases of, I think it was Sunday Times or a UK newspaper who made that thing law for cash, and I excluded one of the members of my group immediately from my group when I learned about it.
Sven Giegold, who went on to become Parliament's Special Rapporteur on transparency, accountability, integrity, he said that in 2016, whenever the special committee that was set up to look at these breaches found evidence of a breach, it reported it to you because you were empowered to act, only you didn't. Only you didn't.
Concrete cases he should raise. It is wrong.
Gerald Hafner, former chair of that committee, also said in 2014 that you never followed up on complaints. Not a single one of these cases has had any conclusion, he said, or has had any consequences. And if that is the end result of the tougher rules adopted by the European Parliament, I think we haven't done Parliament or the citizens or European democracy any favours.
It is wrong. They reported Mr. Hafner came personally to me, I remember, and we agreed about a lot of different cases. Mr. Giegold never found the way to my office, but always every morning to his website with allegations against me personally. I took it very serious, and the Bureau of the European Parliament took a lot of measures. But these were two members of the Green Group who considered themselves to be the opposition against the ruling majority. Therefore, I'm not surprised.
So they're invalid? Their criticisms are invalid, are they?
I think yes. Really? I think I did a lot to increase transparency in the European Parliament.
But there was a lot of controversy on another major gap, wasn't there? The so-called general expenditure allowance that MEPs received for office expenditure, rentals, phone bills, things like that. Each MEP gets 4,342 euros a month, I think it is, with no questions asked and no accountability. Why?
This is a general allowance covering the costs of members of parliament in their constituencies for phones, for newspapers, for books, for...
This is 40 million euros a year of European taxpayers' money. And no controls, no receipts, no financial spot checks, no audits, nothing.
The question of trust, yes. And I trust the members of the European Parliament.
And they said you didn't follow up on the breaches.
We have the same rule here in the German Parliament. You get a general allowance to cover your costs, and this is the same in the European Parliament. And a parliamentarian like Mr. Giegold, for example, or Mr. Häfner, or whomever, who is
and nobody checks. Nobody checks. 40 million euros of European taxpayers' money are just handed out with no controls, no receipts, no audit, nothing.
Yeah, this is a general allowance. If the majority of the European Parliament is of the opinion that this is inappropriated, we calculated, by the way, that 750 members, 12 times the year, 4,000 euros to justify to the administration of the European Parliament costs more money for civil servants controlling than to save that money. It's more expensive.
And that's supposed to comfort people who don't see any controls?
The control is more expensive than the trust. And once more, your presumption, the presumption of those people who criticize is that these members of the Parliament who get that general allowance don't spend the money for the things foreseen for that allowance. And I trust the members. This is the difference between Mr. Giegold and me.
Your own office expenses raised eyebrows, didn't they? I mean, in April 2015, a review of the Parliament's finances noted with concern that the large number of staff based in the office of the President of the European Parliament, 35 people, including 2 drivers and a personal usher, was highly questionable, it said, and they warned that it set a bad example for cost reduction and fiscal responsibility within Parliament. Won't you accept that?
No.
You could have cut your expenses, couldn't you?
No.
Why not?
My office was smaller than the office of my predecessor.
Does that matter? Is that valid?
President of the European Parliament is the president of an institution. He is the president of 8,000 civil servants working for the Parliament, 750 members. You can't make this with two, three advisors. I was not surprised. It was in the mid of a very...
But you took no notice of the criticism. You didn't cut your staffing levels. You didn't get rid of the usher. You didn't get rid of the 2 top-range BMWs, did you?
No, I found that this was appropriated, and I find it until today, and I think my successor had the same stuff. And it is appropriated to manage such a big institution. You need staff, and this was a political decision by a hostile committee.
The Parliament warned that a quarter of voters had a very negative image of the Parliament due to spending. It's a report of the Parliament. And you didn't think you could set an example?
What's more, I disagree. This is to run such an institution, you need support. And I acted in the frame of a structure I earned from my predecessor. I was not the man who invented that structure.
No, but you benefited from it.
Yes, I benefited from it, and I was not surprised.
And you could have cut back, but you didn't.
And I was not surprised that as the first president who tried to transform this only representative post in a political post, I earned a lot of hostility by political opponents, and that they focused suddenly with their criticism on a structural question instead of political content question. I was not surprised, and therefore I repeat, I would have preferred to deal and to discuss with my opponents about political items than because the structure to run
extravagance. Don't talk about extravagance.
Why I was the first one who was criticized? Why all these predecessors were never criticized for it? This was because I was a political figure and trying to make the European Parliament more influential, more powerful, and then you earn also such attacks. I didn't invent it, I earned it, and by the way, my predecessor had more people in the staff than me. I reduced it. When I started in 2012, I reduced the size of my staff.
Mr. Schulz, a year ago...
Never, by the way, these people took note of that. The decision, I reduced the members of my staff in relation to my predecessor.
Mr. Schulz, a year ago you advocated a United States of Europe, a new constitution for Europe. You said any country that didn't adopt it should have to leave the European Union. Why this draconian stance? Who wants Who wants a United States of Europe these days?
Me, for example, I want it. I suggest it because I think
Not many others, really, do they?
in the United Kingdom for sure not. In other countries, yes. I think the United States of
Italy,
Europe.
Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, Croatia,
Yeah, that
Holland, you think they want to?
the right-wing governments in Europe are against deepening integration in the European Union. It's not a news. This is the case, and I'm for sure proud not to share the view of Mr. Orban and Mr. Kaczynski. But if we want to run in future times the European Union and the idea of democracy against people like Mr. Trump, Xi Jinping or Mr. Putin, we have to deepen European integration and not to redevelop the European Union, the kind of loose assembly of national states. And this is my deep conviction, and that's behind that idea of the United States of Europe, which will not be like the United States of America, United Kingdom leaving the European Union, okay, but France and Germany have to deepen their cooperation.
Think it'll ever happen?
I'm deeply convinced that this is the right way to go.
Martin Schulz, thanks very much for being on Conflict Zone.
Thank you.
Thank you.